3 minutes before my wedding, I heard something that destroyed everything.
They said I was the luckiest man alive. Stay with me as I tell you my true life story.
George believes love is a risk he can no longer afford, but fate has already placed Bella directly in his path. Will he walk away before feelings grow, or will the city force him to confront the very thing he has been running from? Stay with me till the end. Port Harcourt never slept, but it never cared either. It breathed smoke, noise, sweat, and impatience, and every morning it swallowed men like George whole. At 29, George's life had narrowed into a single daily rhythm: dawn, dust, shouting, insults, hunger, night. Before the sun rose properly, he was already standing beside an old, battered bus, slapping the metal body with his palm and calling out destinations in a hoarse voice that no longer surprised him. His clothes were faded beyond their original color, torn at the elbows and knees, soaked in sweat before noon. The rubber slippers on his feet had thinned so much that he could feel the heat of the road through them. Passengers shoved past him, some pretending not to see him, others barking orders as if he were invisible and inferior all at once. Money were thrown at his chest instead of placed in his hand. Insults were delivered casually, like greetings. Conductor, you no day here. Guy, the thief you be. See this one? Useless human being. George absorbed it all in silence. He did not argue. He did not curse. He only nodded, collected fares carefully, counted change with precision, and watched people with eyes that seemed too calm for a man living this kind of life. At night, when the bus finally parked and his share of the day's money barely covered food, George walked long distances back to an uncompleted building on the outskirts of the city. There was no gate, no doors, only bare concrete, exposed rods, and broken blocks stacked like forgotten dreams. That was home. He spread a thin mat on the cold floor, placed his worn bag beside his head, and lay staring into darkness, listening to the city hum outside. Sometimes he closed his eyes. Sometimes he didn't. Sleep did not come easily to a man who had learned too much about people. George was not always like this. Not in spirit, not in mind. But the city did not know that, and the city never asked. To Port Harcourt, he was just another struggling young man chasing survival with empty pockets and tired eyes. What people failed to notice was the way George spoke, calm, respectful, deliberate. Or the way he never drank, never smoked, never joined arguments with other conductors. Or how he always stepped aside to allow elderly passengers board first, even when others mocked him for it. There was something restrained about him, something careful, as though he were constantly measuring human behavior, storing it somewhere deep inside. On some evenings, he sat alone on a concrete block outside the uncompleted building, watching couples pass by, laughing, holding hands, arguing over nothing. A shadow crossed his face during those moments, not of loneliness alone, but of memory. George avoided relationships with a quiet determination. When women spoke to him, flirted lightly, or laughed a little too warmly, he pulled back, not rudely, but firmly. There was a guardedness around his heart, like a door that had once been forced open and violently shut again. The other men teased him. "Guy, you know like women?" They laughed. George only smiled faintly. They did not know that his silence was not emptiness, it was restraint. Somewhere inside him lived a fear he could not name out loud. The fear of being chosen for the wrong reasons. The fear of loving again and discovering too late that love had conditions. Every city has its witnesses. The women who sell food by the roadside, the mechanics under trees, the hawkers weaving through traffic. They all noticed George in their own quiet ways. Mama Titi, who sold beans and fried plantain near the bus stop, always served him slightly larger portions when she could. "You be good boy," she once told him. Life go better. George thanked her, paid fully, and walked away without complaint. He never accepted favors he could not return. His pride was silent but firm. On one particular afternoon, as rain threatened and traffic thickened, George stood by the bus shouting destinations when he noticed her for the first time. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't announce herself. She was simply there, waiting, watching, holding her bag close to her chest. Bella. She boarded the bus quietly, greeted him politely, and paid her fare without argument. When their eyes met briefly, George looked away quickly, as he always did. But something lingered. Not attraction at first, recognition. A softness. Over the next few days, she became a familiar face. Always respectful. Always calm. Unlike others, she said thank you. Unlike others, she never spoke down to him. When the bus was overcrowded and tempers flared, Bella stayed silent, observing the chaos with patience. And George, without understanding why, found himself noticing her small habits. The way she adjusted her bag, the way she stared out of the window thoughtfully, the way she smiled gently when greeted. Their conversations were brief at first, Harmless exchanges about the weather, traffic, the stress of the city. Nothing more. Nothing deep. But something began to shift quietly, like a seed pushing against hard soil. George did not intend for anything to grow. He told himself that daily. He reminded himself of his life, his reality, his condition. He reminded himself of the uncompleted building, the torn clothes, the empty nights. He reminded himself of lessons learned the hard way, lessons carved by disappointment and betrayal he was not ready to revisit. Still, Bella's presence lingered in his thoughts longer than he liked. One evening, as he sat outside his building watching the sky darken, he caught himself wondering where she lived, what she did for work, whether she was happy. The realization unsettled him. He stood abruptly, as if caught doing something wrong. "This one is dangerous," he muttered to himself. Very dangerous. That same night, lying on his mat, George stared into darkness and felt something he had buried stir uneasily within him, hope, cautious and unwelcome. He turned to his side, forcing his mind elsewhere, unaware that the city had already begun weaving their paths together. What George and Bella did not know was that this accidental meeting was the beginning of a journey that would shake beliefs, silence mockery, and test love in ways neither of them could imagine. And as the rain finally began to fall on the zinc roofs and broken blocks of Port Harcourt, one question hung quietly in the air, unanswered and dangerous. What happens when a heart that has sworn never to trust again begins to open, slowly, unwillingly, but surely? Bella did not fall in love with George all at once. It did not happen like the stories people told. No dramatic moment, no sudden realization, no rush of fireworks. Instead, it crept into her life quietly, disguised as familiarity. It was the way she began to notice him before she even boarded the bus, her eyes unconsciously searching for his figure among the crowd of shouting conductors. It was the way her shoulders relaxed when she heard his calm voice, calling out routes without insults or aggression. It was the way he returned her greetings with genuine respect, never staring too long, never making her uncomfortable. In a city where men often mistook boldness for confidence, George was different. He spoke softly, but his words carried weight. He listened when she talked, even when the conversation was about nothing important. Sometimes they spoke about the stress of the city, sometimes about the traffic, sometimes about dreams they had once had before life became heavy. George never overshared, but when he did speak, his thoughts were sharp, reflective, too thoughtful for someone society had already written off as just a conductor. Bella noticed this. She noticed how he always counted money carefully, how he never shortchanged passengers even when he could have, how he apologized sincerely when mistakes happened. Slowly, without her permission, admiration replaced curiosity. And admiration, Bella would later learn, was a dangerous place to stand when feelings were involved. George sensed it too, and it scared him. He noticed the way Bella's smile lingered longer now, the way her voice softened when she spoke to him. He noticed the subtle concern in her eyes on days he looked especially tired, the gentle, "Are you okay?" she asked once when rain soaked his clothes and traffic stretched endlessly. That question followed him the entire day like a shadow. Nobody asked him that. Not his fellow conductors, not the drivers, not the city. That night, as he lay in the uncompleted building listening to distant generators and laughter from nearby houses, George wrestled with his thoughts. He told himself he was imagining things. He told himself Bella was just kind. He told himself kindness did not mean interest. And even if it did, he had no right to encourage it. What could he offer her? A life of struggle? Public shame? Endless explanations to friends and family? George had seen how love twisted when money entered the picture. He had seen admiration turn into entitlement, affection into expectation. He had learned, painfully, that some people loved what you provided, not who you were. So he began pulling back, shortening conversations, avoiding eye contact, keeping things strictly professional. But Bella noticed the shift immediately. She did not confront him. She did not demand answers. Instead, she responded with patience. She continued greeting him warmly, continued speaking to him with respect, continued treating him as though he mattered. And that consistency did something to George that hardship never could. It softened him. Bella's friends noticed too, and unlike Bella, they were not patient. They saw the way she smiled when she talked about one conductor guy. They heard the warmth in her voice and the defense that rose instinctively whenever someone laughed. At first, they joked lightly. "So not conductor Udon day like now?" one asked with a laugh. Bella smiled it off, but the joke sharpened quickly. They began asking uncomfortable questions. "Where day live? What future you get? You want suffer for love?" They reminded her of her age, her beauty, her options. They painted pictures of a life she could have, men with cars, men with jobs, men with money. Bella listened quietly, absorbing the words, but not allowing them to root. She tried to explain what they did not understand, that George was kind, that he was respectful, that he treated her like a human being, not a prize. Her friends scoffed. Kindness, they said, did not pay bills. Respect did not build houses. Love without money was foolishness dressed as romance. Bella went home that day heavier than usual, their voices echoing in her head. She stood in front of the mirror for a long time, studying her reflection, wondering if she was indeed being naive. But then she remembered George standing in the rain, soaked and exhausted, still apologizing to passengers for delays that were not his fault. She remembered how he spoke about dignity, about doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. And something inside her refused to let go. Bella did not know it yet, but this was the moment she chose him, not with a declaration, not with a promise, but with quiet loyalty. The turning point came on an ordinary evening. The bus was almost empty, traffic light, the city unusually calm. Bella lingered after paying her fare, her heart pounding louder than the engine. George sensed it and looked up, concern flashing briefly across his face. She hesitated, then spoke. She thanked him, not just for the ride, but for always being kind, always being patient, always being himself. The words caught George off guard. He laughed awkwardly, brushing it off, but Bella held his gaze, serious now. In that moment, something fragile passed between them, an understanding, unspoken but heavy. George felt the walls around his heart tremble. He wanted to tell her to stop. He wanted to protect her from him, from his life, from the storms he carried. But before he could speak, Bella smiled softly and stepped off the bus, leaving him frozen in place. That night, George did not sleep. He paced the empty rooms of the uncompleted building, his thoughts louder than the city outside. He realized something terrifying. He was already attached. An attachment, he knew, was the first step toward pain. Across the city, Bella lay awake too, staring at her ceiling, replaying their interaction over and over. She wondered if she had said too much, if she had crossed the line, if she was setting herself up for heartbreak. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but fate had already made its decision. And as dawn approached, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was no longer just kindness. This was the beginning of something neither of them was prepared to lose. Love did not announce itself gently this time. It arrived carrying weight. By the time George and Bella could no longer pretend they were just strangers sharing polite conversations, the city had already noticed. Conductors teased George openly now, slapping his back and laughing about the fine girl that liked suffering. Drivers made jokes that were not jokes at all, reminding him daily that a woman like Bella would eventually open her eyes. George laughed along sometimes, nodding as if he agreed, but each comment landed somewhere deep, settling like stones in his chest. Bella felt it too, though from a different angle. Her friends no longer hid their disapproval. They spoke loudly around her, deliberately comparing her life to others, pointing out engagements, new phones, flashy lifestyles. They sent her pictures of men who fit better, men with clean clothes and visible ambition. When Bella defended George, the room often fell silent, followed by pitying looks that cut deeper than insults. "We are only advising you," they said. "Love is good, but reality is better." Bella smiled, but inside, doubt wrestled with conviction. Not doubt about George's heart, no, that she trusted completely, but doubt about the future. How long could love survive under constant pressure? How long before exhaustion replaced romance? And yet, every time she imagined walking away, something in her rebelled. Leaving George felt wrong, like abandoning something pure just because it wasn't convenient. George watched Bella absorb humiliation meant for him, and it broke him in ways hunger never could. He noticed the forced smile she wore around her friends, the careful way she avoided certain topics, the quiet sadness that crept into her eyes on days she pretended everything was fine. One evening after a particularly long day where the bus broke down twice and passengers insulted him endlessly, George followed Bella a short distance after work. He did not mean to confront her. He just needed to see her, to reassure himself that she was okay. When he finally caught up, Bella turned, surprised but smiling. They walked together in silence for a while, the city buzzing around them. Then George stopped abruptly. His voice trembled when he spoke. He told her the truth, not about his past, not about anything hidden, but about his fear. He told her he was tired of watching her suffer because of him. He told her she deserved ease, respect, a future without constant explanations. Bella listened quietly, her face unreadable. When he finished, she stepped closer and asked a question that left him exposed. "Do you want me to leave?" George could not answer immediately. The silence stretched painfully. He wanted to say yes, to push her away and save her from a life he believed would only bring struggle. But the truth pressed against his throat. "I don't want to," he finally whispered. Bella nodded slowly, as if she already knew. "Then don't decide for me," she said softly. "Let me choose." That night, George walked back to his uncompleted building with a heaviness that no amount of exhaustion could erase. Love had stopped being simple. It had become responsibility. The city did not relent. If anything, it grew louder. Bella's friends intensified their efforts, staging what they called interventions. They spoke bluntly now, accusing her of settling, of wasting her youth, of romanticizing poverty. One even laughed and asked what kind of house she imagined raising children in, an uncompleted building with leaking roofs. Bella cried that night for the first time since meeting George. She cried quietly, not out of regret, but from the fatigue of constant defense. Meanwhile, George faced humiliation of a different kind. A passenger once recognized Bella, asked loudly if she was that girl dating a conductor, and laughed cruelly. The bus erupted in murmurs. George's hands shook as he collected money, his face burning with shame. That evening, he sat alone, staring at the concrete floor, replaying the scene over and over. He realized something painful. Loving Bella meant exposing her to ridicule she never asked for. And for the first time, George considered doing what he had always believed was right, letting go. He avoided Bella the next day, and the next. When she boarded the bus, he kept conversation short, his voice distant. Bella noticed immediately. Confusion turned into fear. She confronted him quietly, but George deflected. He told her he was busy, tired, stressed. Bella left that day with her heart pounding, sensing something slipping away. George lay awake that night, tears he did not acknowledge soaking into his mat. He convinced himself he was doing the noble thing. He told himself pain now was better than destruction later. But deep down, he knew this decision would cost him something he might never recover. The breaking point came faster than George expected. One afternoon, Bella arrived at the bus stop visibly upset. Her eyes were swollen, her voice unsteady. She told George her friends had given her an ultimatum, him or them. A clean break. No more excuses. No more he is kind. George felt the ground shift beneath him. He saw his future in that moment and it terrified him. He imagined Bella alone, isolated, choosing him and resenting him later. He imagined her choosing them and moving on, eventually forgetting him. Both outcomes hurt, but one felt crueler. George took a deep breath and made a decision that would define everything that followed. He told Bella she should listen to them. The words tasted bitter. Bella stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. "Do you want me to go?" she asked again, her voice cracking. George looked away. That was all the answer she needed. She nodded slowly, tears slipping free, and walked away without another word. George stood there long after she disappeared into the crowd, his heart screaming while his mind insisted this was necessary. But as the bus drove off and the city swallowed her completely, George felt something collapse inside him. He did not know that this moment, this silence, would soon force a decision neither of them could escape. Bella did not disappear for long. The silence between them stretched for days, heavy and unbearable, but it did not break her spirit. It clarified it. While George wrestled alone with guilt and self-blame, Bella was making the hardest decision of her life. She replayed every warning, every insult, every look of pity. She imagined the life everyone said she deserved, then imagined a life without George in it, and that image felt emptier than poverty ever could. When she returned, it was not with anger, nor accusations, but with a calm that unsettled George deeply. She found him one evening at the bus park, his shoulders slumped, his eyes dull with exhaustion. She did not ask why he pushed her away. She did not demand explanations. She underscore toggle only asked one question, steady and fearless. "If I choose you, will you stand with me?" George felt his chest tighten. He tried to warn her again about hardship, about shame, about uncertainty. But Bella interrupted him gently. She told him she was tired of people deciding her life for her. She told him she had chosen him with open eyes. George's defenses crumbled in that moment. Love, once something he feared, now stood before him demanding courage. When he nodded slowly, reluctantly, but honestly, Bella smiled through tears. And just like that, a decision that would shock everyone was made. The announcement was quiet, but its impact was loud. When Bella told her friends she was getting married to George, laughter filled the room. Not the joyous kind, but the cruel, disbelieving kind. Some thought she was joking. Others thought she had finally lost her mind. Questions came fast and sharp. Married? To that conductor? With what future? Have you thought at all? Bella stood firm, her voice calm but unwavering. She told them love was not a business transaction. That marriage was not an investment portfolio. That she was choosing peace over pride. Her words fell on deaf ears. The mockery intensified. They called her foolish, desperate, blind. Some cut her off immediately, refusing to attend anything related to the wedding. Even her family was divided. Concerned whispers filled the house. Unspoken disappointment hung heavy in the air. Meanwhile, George faced humiliation of his own. Word spread quickly through the bus park. Conductors laughed openly now, asking if he was ready to carry family inside uncompleted building. Drivers shook their heads, calling him selfish for dragging a woman into his struggles. George absorbed it all, but at night, alone, doubt crept in. He questioned whether love alone could sustain them. Whether Bella would wake up one day and regret choosing him. Whether he was condemning her to a life of hardship she did not deserve. But every time he considered backing out, he remembered her eyes, steady, certain, unafraid. And that memory kept him standing. The wedding day arrived without celebration or spectacle. There were no grand halls, no expensive outfits, no loud music. Just a small gathering, a modest venue, borrowed chairs, and a few people who believed love was enough. Bella wore a simple dress, radiant not because of fabric or design, but because of conviction. George stood beside her in his best, still worn, still modest, but his posture was proud, his voice steady when he said his vows. As they exchanged promises, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some watched with pity, others with disbelief. But Bella smiled as though nothing else existed. When the ceremony ended, there was no lavish reception, only quiet congratulations and lingering stares. That night, Bella moved into George's world fully. The uncompleted building greeted her with its rough edges and unfinished walls. She did not complain. She cleaned, rearranged, and laughed softly when rain dripped through cracks in the ceiling. George watched her in silence, guilt battling admiration. He apologized repeatedly, but Bella stopped him gently. "This is our beginning," she said, "not our end." Her words settled deep within him. For the first time, George understood the depth of her sacrifice. And for the first time, he felt the crushing weight of the truth he was still hiding. Living together tested everything. Bella experienced poverty not as an idea, but as reality. Limited food, unpredictable days, neighbors who watched and judged. Her former friends' voices echoed in her head, louder now that the wedding was over. Sometimes doubt crept in late at night, quiet and persistent. But each morning, George rose early, determined, disciplined, refusing to surrender to despair. Bella saw his effort, his integrity, his refusal to compromise his values. Love, she realized, was not about comfort. It was about character. Still, the strain grew heavier with each passing day. George felt the tension tightening inside him, the truth pressing against his conscience. He knew the moment was coming, the moment he would have to choose between preserving the purity of their love and revealing a reality that could shatter it. One evening, as Bella slept beside him, George sat awake, staring into the darkness, his heart pounding. He whispered a promise into the silence, one that would change everything very soon. Outside, the city carried on, unaware that a storm was quietly gathering inside a man who had finally found love when he had nothing, and feared what would happen when he gave her everything. George had never felt fear like this before. Lying awake on the thin mat in the uncompleted building, listening to the soft snores of Bella beside him, he felt the weight of the truth pressing harder than poverty ever did. For months, he had hidden his identity, pretending to be a struggling bus conductor, a man without fortune, without influence, without anything to offer but himself. It had been necessary to know whether love existed without money, without luxury, without comfort. And now, as the days passed and their bond deepened, George realized the moment had come to reveal everything. The risk was enormous. Bella had chosen him without hesitation before. Would she still choose him now that everything she had endured was unnecessary? Would she forgive him for not trusting her with the truth sooner? He wondered if the life he was about to unveil would make her recoil, question her choices, or even regret the love she had so courageously offered. Yet, he also knew this. She had proven herself in ways no amount of money could ever measure. And he owed her the honesty she deserved. The following afternoon, George led Bella out of the uncompleted building under the pretense of showing her a new job opportunity in another part of the city. Bella, ever trusting, walked beside him, her hand brushing his without a thought of hesitation. They arrived at a quiet, tree-lined driveway, the end of which revealed a massive, gleaming mansion, modern and imposing. George stopped abruptly and gestured toward it. Bella froze. She stared, her jaw dropping slightly, her eyes wide in disbelief. "George, what?" she whispered. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then George took a deep breath, his voice steady but soft. "Bella, what you see is the truth. I am not what you think. I am not poor. I am net this," he said, his hand sweeping toward the mansion. "And I left it all behind because I wanted to find someone who loved me, not my money." The words fell like thunder. Bella's knees almost buckled. She gripped his hand tightly, not because of shock, but to anchor herself to the man she had loved through hardship, ridicule, and sacrifice. Every moment of mockery, every scornful glance from friends, every night spent in the uncompleted building, all of it now culminated in a single breathtaking revelation. George had chosen her not just as a partner, but as the one person who could see beyond wealth, beyond status, beyond appearances. Bella's heart surged with a mixture of relief, disbelief, and pure joy. The city, the mockery, the hardships, they all seemed distant now, insignificant compared to the reality of love proven genuine. George watched her carefully, gauging her reaction, waiting for doubt, waiting for hesitation. But it never came. Bella laughed softly, tears filling her eyes, and whispered, "So, All of this, it was a test. George nodded, a small, relieved smile tugging at his lips. Yes, not because I didn't trust you, but because I needed to know for myself that love can exist without gold or status. And you proved it beyond words. Bella pulled him into a tight embrace, feeling the solidity of his shoulders, the warmth of his chest, and the truth in every word he had spoken. She realized in that moment that love had never been about comfort, wealth, or convenience. It had been about trust, courage, and the willingness to stand firm in the face of adversity. The woman who had been mocked, teased, and doubted by friends now stood triumphant. She had loved a man when he had nothing, and now she would witness the world bow to the authenticity of that love. The next weeks were a whirlwind of transformation, not of George, for he had never changed in heart, but of their lives in the eyes of society. Invitations were sent, hotels booked, and plans made for a luxurious destination wedding. Unlike the humble, intimate ceremony in the uncompleted building, this wedding was a celebration of triumph, loyalty, and love that had been tested and proven. Guests arrived in awe at the grand estate, the opulent decorations, and the undeniable chemistry between George and Bella. Cameras clicked relentlessly. Friends who had mocked her now watched in stunned silence as Bella walked confidently down the aisle, radiant in a gown that shimmered under the golden light. George, handsome and composed, waited for her at the altar with a smile that radiated pride, humility, and deep, unwavering love. Their vows, this time, carried not just hope, but certainty, a certainty built on months of struggle, perseverance, and a love that refused to bend. Every word, every glance, every gesture told the story of a love that had survived judgment, poverty, and ridicule, only to emerge stronger, unstoppable, and undeniable. As the sun set over the destination venue, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose, George and Bella stood hand in hand, their eyes locked, their hearts full. This was more than a wedding. It was a statement, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, trust over doubt, and character over circumstance. The city, the hardships, the laughter of former skeptics, all faded into memory. They had proven that love cannot be measured by wealth, cannot be judged by society, and cannot be broken by mockery. And as they sealed their vows with a kiss that promised eternity, George whispered softly to Bella, "You loved me when I had nothing, and now you have everything. And so do I." Bella smiled, tears falling freely, knowing that every struggle, every insult, and every moment of doubt had led to this, their victory, their happiness, their truth. The uncompleted building, the bus rides, the ridicule, they were not just memories. They were the proof that love, when real, is stronger than anything the world can throw at it.